incredible and shocking moment that defined not just reality TV, but the internet as a whole. In fact, she changed what it meant to go viral and made internet history, and became one of the internet's first global superstars, all from an older, shy British woman.
You are a little tiger, aren't you?
Oh, I don't know about that.
You are.
An amazing singer that sadly had no idea what she was in for, and then who just as fast completely disappeared. In 2009, Susan Boyle's incredible run on Britain's Got Talent shot her to superstardom. She was massively successful right after BGT, but then something strange happened. She just disappeared, and for years, nobody even heard from her or knew what she was doing. But a couple of months ago, she suddenly reappeared and shocked everyone. And like you, I have a few questions. Like, where has she been all these years? What does her life look like now? Is she okay? And if so, is she planning a comeback? The truth is honestly pretty surprising. Susan Boyle is definitely one of the most famous people to come from a reality talent show, but you know what's weird? She didn't even win her season. But even years later, everyone still remembers her name, and for a good reason. The simple truth, what we saw her do with her voice was just incredible. Even if she didn't win, her life got completely turned upside down. Newspapers wrote that the internet has not seen anything quite like Susan Boyle, and her online popularity is headed straight to the history books. The video of her singing went crazy viral. How viral, you ask? It became the most watched video ever on the internet. So given her talent and her popularity, she signed a record deal, starting doing live shows, and made history. Her first album became the fastest selling worldwide debut album of all time. Back in 2009, nobody could stop talking about Susan Boyle, but then, and this was so strange, just like she showed up on our screens overnight, Susan disappeared from the spotlight just as quickly. But why? Nobody really heard much about her for over 10 years until a couple of months ago. It was a bit of a shocker to everyone when, completely unannounced, Susan showed up at the finale of this year's BGT. Obviously, it was planned that she'd perform, but the public had no idea about it. In front of shocked viewers, she got on stage, and you know what? It was honestly pretty amazing. After over 10 years of being away from the public eye, she performed her most famous song she's ever done, I Dreamed a Dream from Les Miserables, which was actually her audition song in 2009, the one that shook the whole world. Because when she walked on that stage for the first time, nobody quite expected her singing to be so unbelievably good. And this year at the BGT finale, she proved to everyone that she still got it. But after the song was finished, it turns out that Susan wasn't done yet. After the performance, she gave us a touching, heartfelt update about her life, and it turns out that getting back on stage was a long and hard journey for her.
I suffered a minor stroke, and I thought it crazy to go back on stage, and I have done it.
Thankfully, it was only a minor one, but it was still a huge scare for her, and you won't believe what happened after the stroke. See, even if it was a minor stroke, she still had to deal with its consequences, one of which was pretty shocking, especially for a singer. See, the effects of the stroke were bad enough that she had to recover some of her ability to speech, but worse, she actually had to learn to sing all over again. Susan's stroke happened in April 2022, so she's been recovering for over a year. But to be honest, throughout the whole time, a huge question mark hung over her life. She didn't really know if things would even ever go back to normal for her. She's worried she'd never perform or sing, but she remembered her old self, where she had come from, and how she found her inner strength to perform, especially that first time on live TV so many years ago. So she worked hard at her recovery and fought against the odds, and shared her comeback with everyone on live TV. And it was just such a heartwarming moment to witness, especially after she shared a special moment with Simon Cowell.
Susan, we owe you so much.
While everyone seemed shocked to find out that Susan was struggling, Simon apparently wasn't, and he said some really impactful words to her.
You know, I knew you weren't well.
When everybody else was in the dark, Simon obviously knew what was going on in Susan's life. It turns out that despite their very obvious different personalities and outside of the spotlight, Simon and Susan have actually built built a strong friendship over the years. Susan doesn't really seem like someone who makes friends easily, but she and Simon became such fast friends after her first appearance on BGT. And you know what's nice about this? That Simon knew about her health problems clearly shows that they're still keeping in touch even now. And even more touching than that was Simon's strong belief. A belief that Susan would be able to make a comeback.
If anyone was going to come back, you were going to come back.
This was a moment of triumph for Susan, but the real question is, now that she's finally back, will she continue performing? And to answer that question, we have to look way back into the past. Obviously, she hasn't been performing because of her stroke, but remember, the stroke only happened last year, which begs the question, why was Susan pretty much gone from the public eye for much longer than that? Yes, there were a few exceptions. The biggest in recent years was her cameo on the TV show River City in 2021. So she obviously didn't fully quit being in the public eye, but then ask yourself, why was she not in more things or gone on tour or something? The answer to that, we have to go all the way back to the first time on BGT back in 2009. Susan's run on the show lasted about 7 weeks, which may be a long time if you're comparing it to Kim Kardashian's 72-day marriage to Chris Humphries, but to be honest, it is not a very long time for what Susan went through. Going from a virtual nobody to the biggest star in the country, maybe even the world, but that's exactly what happened to Susan. She absolutely skyrocketed to fame, and yes, people loved her, but it wasn't at all easy for her for very good reasons. See, she actually struggled with getting used to all the exposure, and I mean, that kind of thing would be a lot for anyone, but it really seemed to take a huge toll on Susan, because it turns out that Susan is actually autistic, which can make it challenging for her to handle social situations. Susan only started sharing her autism diagnosis with the public a few years later, but here's the irony. It was actually thanks to her time on BGT that she was able to get an accurate diagnosis. Before that, Susan thought she had a learning disability that started at an unlikely time. The diagnosis she had said it started because of complications during birth, but even growing up, she knew something wasn't right. She actually said the diagnosis of a learning disability never quite felt right, and thanks to her BGT run and her rise to fame, she was luckily able to confirm the truth of her autism diagnosis. So even despite all the pressures of overnight fame, there were positive effects for her mental health that came out of it. But that wasn't before something pretty shocking happened, and Susan's mental health absolutely plummeted. While Susan was performing on the show every week, she was doing her best to hold on, but all the while, with all the newfound stress and getting more and more attention from the media, only a day after the show's finale, Susan hit rock bottom. Susan admitted herself to a mental health facility. Her overnight success would be hard for anybody to handle, but it was especially hard for somebody with autism. But how long did she spend there? It turns out she was only in the facility for a couple of days, but still, when she came out, she kept her distance from the public eye, and for good reason, because that was really only the start of a hard journey, a journey that saw her almost completely withdraw over the next few years. But that was interrupted by some bad mental health episodes, and ones that unfortunately got recorded in public. If that wasn't hard enough, there was also some family drama with her siblings mixed into that pot as well. All in all, can you really blame her for just bowing out of the spotlight completely? But also don't forget, even though she was out of the spotlight, she actually never stopped being active as a musician and clocked in some amazing numbers where she actually recorded 8 studio albums in 10 years. So it turns out that even if she wasn't in the spotlight, even if she was dealing with pretty serious mental health and family issues, Susan Boyle is one of the hardest working singers out there, but with a catch. She's just not in the spotlight. But the question on everyone's lips, especially after her performance on BGT this year, is she ready for a comeback? Because she actually could be planning a big return. There's a lot of things going for this idea. She's been learning to manage her mental health around fame, and she's probably learned a lot about herself too. Nothing says another attempt at fame would go south as quickly as the first one, but then again, there is no guarantee that the media would be less intense this time. She's already made the decision once to keep out of the way of the press, so maybe she'll want to keep it that way. But then again, I could be completely wrong here. Don't forget, Susan is a fighter and a force to be reckoned with. But more than that, she also definitely has reason to want to come back. The stroke she had last year could have been a wake-up call for her, filling her with determination to learn to sing again and come back on stage. stage, maybe even with a newfound strength. You never know. She might actually change her mind about being in the spotlight now. Either way, we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, what do you guys think? Do you think Susan will come back now? Let me know in the comments below.